Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Savandcheesy show. Welcome to our program, Dr. Haynes.
Glad to be here.
Do you mind introducing yourself further?
Sure. I am Brian Haynes, Dr. Brian Haynes, Vice President for Student Affairs here at CSUSB. And I'm very excited to be here this afternoon to participate in this interview.
For our listeners, could you describe student affairs?
Sure. It encompasses over 20 departments. Our role is really to serve students outside of the classroom, a lot of co-curricular activities, student engagement types of activities. We like to think that we're all about the student experience outside of the classroom.
Okay, amazing, amazing. What is the biggest part of your job?
I would say that there are many parts of the job that are large, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I use that term really to denote the importance of what we're doing. I think in terms of conduct. I think in terms of student housing. I think in terms of financial aid, admissions. So there are many parts of the job, many parts of the division that are so important that I can honestly say, Darnell, that I'm not sure that one is more important than the other.
Right.
Because they're all interconnected as well. And one of the things we know about the student experience is that there are many parts to the ecosystem known as the student experience. And I would honestly say one part is probably not larger than the other part.
Okay, so I want to ask you, having responsibilities, 20 different departments, do you have different responsibilities in each one? And if so, can you describe at least a little bit for us?
Sure. All of the departments are very different. Some are extremely large, some are smaller. Again, I think in terms of our operations like admissions, which is a very large operation. I think in terms of student housing, which is a very large operation. I think in terms of our conduct operation, which is small by way of staff numbers, but so significant, so important here on campus. So that's how I would sort of describe some of our departments. But I must say, I'm very excited for me to come to work every day, to support student success, to enhance the student experience. And really, we have a great team of 300 plus individuals who come to work every day. They work extremely hard. And I can tell you that they are also equally as committed to enhancing the student experience.
Okay, so can you just say you're more passionate about it as a whole than departments?
Sure. As the leader of the division, I sort of think that's my role, to really have passion about student affairs in general. Now, I will say, on a side note, my background, I started off in student activities, which would be comparable to our Office of Student Engagement. So there are days that I reflect back on starting my career, and perhaps there are times when I think in terms of that department and what I might do a little differently. And so I would say that's one minor difference, because that's my background in student affairs. But I would say all of the departments are operating at a very high level, and again, I think we're doing great work.
Is there any trials and tribulations that you would like to share, being the VP of Affairs and seeing the participation and things of that nature of the students?
Sure. I think for me, the times that I have to participate in, say, conduct matters whereby students might be asked to leave the university for various reasons, I think those are some of the toughest decisions that one has to be a part of. I think in terms of just the sheer magnitude of some of those cases, I know that we're also seeing increasing numbers of students experiencing either housing insecurity or food insecurity. I mean, those are always tough situations because we know that if you don't have a place to sleep or a place to stay, or if you don't have enough food to eat, you're probably not going to be a successful college student. So I would say use the word trials and tribulations. For me, those are the toughest situations that I deal with on a daily basis. And unfortunately, they are increasingly occurring on a daily basis.
Right. Okay. And what about the positives that you see?
Oh, many, many positive things.
Okay.
Walking across the campus green, seeing students engaged in activities, going to the student union, seeing students sitting in the student union, having fun, laughing between classes, going to athletic events are always exciting for me. Go Yotes, by the way. So I would say there are far more positive things occurring here than some of the trials and tribulations that I just alluded to.
Okay. Do you mind telling us where you were before CSUSB?
Sure. I have had the opportunity to work on a number of colleges, on a number of college campuses, and at a number of colleges and universities. I started my career at Ohio University. It's also where I received my master's and PhD degree. I am an undergraduate, graduate of The Ohio State University, which is in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. I've worked at Gettysburg College, Ohio University, East Carolina University. I've worked in Florida, Florida Board of Regents in Tallahassee, Florida, Florida International in Miami, Florida, Clayton State University in Atlanta, Georgia, and now here. But I have to say, this has been the best experience for me on a college campus. CSUSB is diverse, is dynamic. There's a lot of passion here on campus. And I really feel that when I come to work every day, I am actually having a major impact on the lives of many students from the Inland Empire region.
Okay. Out of all those wonderful experiences that you had at these different colleges, what can you say you pulled from each individual experience to help you become the great person you are today?
Well, thank you for that positive comment. But I think back to early on in my career, first working at Ohio University, pursuing my doctorate degree there. And I'll just back up, if I may. I did not even know that the student affairs profession existed until I started working as a graduate student at Ohio University. And I'll just put a plug in for our profession, the profession of student affairs. The student affairs profession has been around as long as colleges and universities have been around. Often overlooked when students are considering a profession, but if you want to have an impact on the daily lives of college students, I would strongly encourage any student listening. I would encourage the students here in the room, you, Darnell, you, Jose, to consider the student affairs profession. But back to your initial question, for me, when I look back over my career, I take bits and pieces from every stop along the way. Go back to my experience at Ohio University, which was a rural campus. I learned very early on in my career that working on a rural campus probably was not where my heart would ultimately be or end up. In fact, I believe that my passion is working with students in more of an urban environment because that's where I grew up, in an urban environment. So that's where I'm very comfortable. I go back to my time at Gettysburg College. I was there for 1 year. Gettysburg College, a small liberal arts college. One might say that it was a step below the Ivy League schools. That did not resonate with me because for me, working with students who might be perceived as academically talented per se, and in that environment just did not resonate for me or with me. Working at East Carolina, I think in terms of my time there and working with students from all over the state of North Carolina, I think in terms of how passionate the campus community is for the campus, i.e. ECU. Working in Tallahassee, working in FIU. FIU is very diverse. FIU is very dynamic. It's in the city of Miami. So that's my takeaway from there. And then, of course, Clayton State, living, working in the Atlanta area, also another diverse, dynamic urban area. So for me, I think back, I take bits and pieces of those experiences, and really that's what I bring to CSUSB. It's those experiences that guide me every day to doing the very best that I can to support student success here at CSUSB.
Okay. You said you were a grad student at Ohio State, correct?
Ohio University.
Ohio University,
Yes.
excuse me. Could you explain to the listeners what a grad student is or what a grad program is? Because speaking from personal experience, I didn't learn about it till I went to NERSA for the first time last quarter, and they were telling me about grad programs in different schools and, you know, being a grad student and all that. And didn't want to say I was discouraged, but I wish I knew about it earlier because it's now my 4th year. And, you know, things of that nature. And I would like to pursue something along those lines. I just wasn't aware of it at the moment. So,
yeah, many of the colleges and universities across the country have graduate assistant types of positions. And really, it's an opportunity for a student who's in an academic program. It might be in a physics program. It might be in a history program. You mentioned NERSA. It might be in a wellness program where you get hands-on experience. You're not a student employee, you're a step above a student employee, but you're not a full-time professional employee either. So it's great experience. You basically get a part-time salary. In many cases, at many schools, they also pay your tuition and fees as part of that package, and you work for 20 hours in that environment. So if at all possible, if it's something you want to pursue, I would encourage you to do that. It's a great way to get some good experience that will catapult you into your career.
okay. So you don't feel it's too late to apply and things of that nature?
Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, one of the things that I encourage all students to consider, if they're fortunate enough to do this, but for me, I went right from an undergraduate program to a master's program to a PhD program, straight through. But along the way, I had several graduate assistantships, and then near the tail end of my PhD studies, I actually was full-time employed by Ohio University. So, graduate assistantships are very, very important while you're in graduate school. It's a great way to jumpstart your career, build your resume, but most importantly, to get some great experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You also said that you are more urban. Could you explain to the listeners what you mean by that as well?
Well, I just think in terms of my background growing up, I think in terms of just the experiences I've had on various college campuses. And I personally like working with college students in more of an urban environment. As you know, there are over 6,000 colleges and universities across the country, many in urban areas, big cities, metropolitan areas, and really that's where my passion is. And that's what I was alluding to. It's just my background. It's just something I'm passionate about, helping students, working with students in that type of environment.
Okay, thank you. If you're just listening, you're on Chi Radio, live local bands 24/7. We're here interviewing Dr. Haynes, VP of Student Affairs. Segue into our next set of questions. What is your most memorable experience as a VP?
Wow, that's a good question. I think those experiences are, there are a few. I really feel good about the students that I personally worked with and when I see them cross the stage at graduation. I think in terms of the work that I do, and I see a lot of students, and I see them outside of the classroom, so I know some of the trials and tribulations that they've gone through. I've talked with students about issues back home with parents and siblings and other family members and some of the struggles that they've had to go through. And really, when I see them cross that stage, it almost brings tears to my eyes sometimes when I think in terms of some of the things that our students, not only here at CSUSB, but where I worked at previously, have gone through just to get to that point. And when you think in terms of education in general, the numbers of individuals in this country with baccalaureate degrees is low when compared to some of the other countries. So it is a significant accomplishment to get a baccalaureate degree, and as you well can imagine, in numbers of students with master's degrees and PhD degrees are lower as you continue up the continuum, so to speak.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, to be successful, do you feel it requires more than just education? Like some would quote unquote say street smarts, or just being able to apply things to certain situations?
Yeah, I think you have to be a critical thinker in any environment that you're in. And I think higher education teaches you to do that. I think one might argue it's always good to have some baseline level of street smart, so to speak, however we define that. And I know that's sort of one of those ambiguous terms. But at the end of the day, employers want to know if you can critically think. Most of the situations that you might encounter on a daily basis require some level of critical thinking. And that's what education does, right? It teaches you to critically think through issues, to think how you might interact with individuals. I think one might argue there's a balance, but if I had to weigh street smarts versus education, I would always lean toward education.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask, is there a particular experience or challenge that you had to face as VP that's changed you in a either negative or positive way?
Well, there are a number of challenges that I have experienced in my VP role. Again, I just go back to some of the decisions that we make regarding conduct-related matters. One of the things that I had to do early on, my first year as a VP when I worked back at Clayton State University in the Atlanta area, is deliver news to a parent that their son had been killed in a car accident. So I think back, and those are situations that I remember. Those are situations that were very stressful, were very difficult for me, but they have framed how I proceed now. There are several, but those are situations that immediately come to mind.
Okay. You're held at the highest regard. Nothing but good words when I hear your name. Even though I just met you, I didn't know who you were, and it was just, that's Dr. Haynes, and I was just blown away, by the good words. May I ask what your goals and aspirations are?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words, and I'll just I'll address the first part if I may. For me, it's all about excellence, and I think you should be excellent all the time if possible, and really that's what I strive for. So thank you for the kind words. But my goals here at CSUSB is to lead a division of student affairs that transforms the student experience here. And we're starting some of that with new student housing. I'm sure you guys have noticed the construction fence over by the Jack H. Brown College of Business.
Yes, sir.
I know that you've heard about the new dining hall that is being constructed adjacent to the student housing complex. Perhaps you participated in the union expansion conversation. So for me, those are the short-term goals that I have to really transform the student experience here. And I think some of our facilities will help us with that. We're also implementing and initiating a number of new programs that I also think will help that, just to get students more involved, students more engaged here on campus. So those are really the goals that I have as a student affairs vice president. I would say on a personal note, for me, personal goal is just to be the very best every day. And for me, coming here, I try not to have any off days, because if I have an off day, as a leader. People know that. People feel that. And I'm always trying to encourage students, faculty, and staff. So for me, I always try to operate at a very high level and really to encourage as many people as possible. I mean, to be honest, I think just words of encouragement are so helpful in environments like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I recall you saying excellence every day. That's what you pride yourself on. May I ask, does it ever feel like too much pressure sometimes, or like you're in character, even though you are a prestigious man and you are excellent? Does it ever feel like sometimes expectations lead to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Or excellence leads to expectations. If you don't meet that standard all the time, then it's a failure in a sense. Do you ever feel like that?
No. I have to honestly tell you that no. I mean, for me, there's a quote that I use and on a regular basis. Les Brown says it best: "No one rises to low expectations." So for me, the expectations are always high. I never think in terms of failure. Maybe I should, but it's just something I don't think in terms of. So I never think in terms of missing the mark. I mean, now, are we always going to be perfect? No way. But for me, shooting for perfection, shooting for excellence is like shooting for the stars. And I never think in terms of anything less.
Okay. One thing I wanted to share with you, that many of the people I've spoken to say that you'll be a phenomenal president of a university one day. Is that a goal you have, or is that a plan in the near future, or in the future at all?
Yeah, I've given that some consideration, but I would say that's not one of my immediate goals. First and foremost, I want to transform this experience for students here at CSUSB, and that's my total focus at this point. If the time comes where it's my quote-unquote season to consider a presidency, certainly I'll know that and I'll head in that direction at the appropriate time, but that's not at the forefront of my thinking right now.
Okay.
I'm having frankly, a lot of fun here working at CSUSB.
Okay. Could you describe an event or experience in your life that helped define who you are, growing up?
Sure. I think back to the community in which I was raised, and for me, I remember going away to college, and I now know what people mean when they say, for many of our students, going away to college really is a community event. I remember when I went away to college, there were people in the community who actually rode with me, with my parents, to take me to college. I look back and I thought, wow, they really cared about my education. I didn't know it at the time, right? I just thought, why do they want to do this? But I look back, there were some older individuals in the community, and they really wanted to support my education. So that's something that I'm always mindful of with many of our students, who college really is a family or community affair, right? So I get it because I've lived it. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I just think in terms of all of the great leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with and work under along the way, the great lessons that I've learned, and how I try to instill that in our team in student affairs, how I try to instill that in students that I have the opportunity to interact with. So many lessons along the way. And I'll just say this, I mean, for me, I'm always learning, always trying to grow, always evolving.
Mm-hmm. May I ask you, what are some of your hobbies, things you like to do now or as a youth?
Sure. I like to watch sports. I'm a diehard Ohio State Buckeye football fan because that's where I did my undergraduate. I like watching sports on TV, going to games when possible. I like to read newspapers. those types of things. So those are the hobbies that come to mind. Working out, those types of things.
Okay. Even as a youth, you'd like to do the same things?
Well, as a youth, play sports, very actively involved in sports as a youth. Played an alto saxophone as a youth up through high school. So, I was very active along the way. Yeah.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you, what are some trials and tribulations you had being a man of color coming up in the community you came from and academically?
Yeah, I think, the community piece, growing up, I remember growing up, and my community was pretty much all black, pretty much all African American. I remember as a teen being stopped, profiled, stopped as I was driving to work one morning in high school. I think back to just being in college and some of the feelings of isolation that you might feel as a student of color. I experienced those same things, even though I was in an environment where there were a fairly large number of students of color, but just still feeling some of that isolation. I think in terms of my career now and what I've been able to experience along the way, early on in my career, because remember I went straight through from undergraduate to master's to PhD program. Early on in my career, I was one of the younger professionals and one of the few professionals of color, and generally the only African American male in the room, and how that sort of shaped my experiences as well, and how that molded me, and how that also helped to instill in me the desire to pursue additional leadership opportunities. So for me, my experience is fairly similar to what other men of color, leaders of color, experienced or have experienced here in America.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening. Peace, love, and positivity.